The Olympus EM10 was released back in 2014. At the time, it cost around $700. Nowadays you can find it used for as low as $200, and you can actually find it cheaper than that if you shop around. That begs the question, is this camera still worth it nowadays? Right away, the build quality of the EM10 is very impressive. And don't let the DSLR style looks fool you. This is actually a tiny camera, but it still has some weight to it. This is the third tier in Olympus's OM-D line, coming in just below the EM1 and the EM5. It has a cool retro film style body, a 16 megapixel micro four thirds sensor, and probably its biggest selling point, 3-axis image stabilization. Now, obviously the original EM5 has 5-axis image stabilization, but I gotta say, in terms of real-world use, the EM10's 3-axis image stabilization is actually pretty great. I mean, I've been filming all of this B-roll handheld with different lenses of varying focal lengths, and I've had no problem whatsoever. In terms of video, the EM10 is a little bit of a disappointment. I mean, there's 1080p at 30 frames per second, and well, that's pretty much it. No 60 frames per second, and there's not even 24 frames per second. It's kind of frustrating because there's been a few firmware updates throughout the years, and Olympus has never once addressed that with this camera. Likewise, there's no mic input, and the screen on the EM10 is one of those that just kind of tilts slightly upwards and slightly downwards. The EM10 is definitely a photography camera first, with video thrown in as an added bonus feature. And speaking of photography, autofocus on the EM10 is pretty good. In terms of video, on the other hand, it's just okay. I mean, it's not as bad as most Panasonic cameras, but it's nowhere near as good as Canon's dual pixel autofocus or Sony's phase detect autofocus, just to name a few. The autofocus on the EM10 isn't perfect, but it's definitely workable. Now, this isn't necessarily a feature of the EM10, but it's something that you definitely need to know if you're considering this camera. A lot of the original EM10s and even a handful of the first gen EM5s had a problem where the mode dial simply stopped working. If you're not familiar with that, just Google EM10 mode dial not working and look at how many people on forums have that problem. I know from firsthand experience because the mode dial on my camera doesn't work either. My EM10 is stuck in manual mode, which sounds fine, right? I mean, I shoot all of my pictures in manual, I film all my videos in manual. What's wrong with your camera being stuck in manual mode? Well, the problem is if you hit record from any of the photography modes, i.e. program mode, aperture priority, shutter priority, manual mode, the video automatically defaults to full auto, and there's no setting where you can change that. So ironically, I have a camera that's stuck in manual mode, but every time I hit the record button, my video is in full auto. The only workaround I've found for that is just by using a variable ND filter, and you can kind of sort of trick the camera into using the settings that you want, but you can't be precise. It's frustrating because if you look on the forums, everyone's suggestion is just use the Olympus app. If you use the Olympus app, you can change the modes from there. The Olympus app only allows you to change the photography modes. You can change through all of these modes here, but you can't use the app to change into movie mode. It's frustrating because this whole thing could have been fixed with a simple firmware update. So being a video user with a broken mode dial, I must hate the Olympus EM10, right? Well, no, actually. See, I've always thought about cameras the way Jeremy Clarkson thinks about cars. Either they have soul or they don't. Either you bond with them or you don't. And for whatever reason, the Olympus EM10 is one of those cameras that I've just totally bonded with throughout the years. Regardless of any shortcomings or any frustrating malfunctions, I still just really enjoy using that camera. The EM10 is one of those cameras where if I just walk past and see it on the shelf, I'll pick it up and take a few random pictures, or I'll film a few random video clips just because I like using the camera that much. So the EM10's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, and I don't care. It's just a camera that I genuinely enjoy using. Sometimes the overall user experience just kind of overrides whatever shortcomings the camera has. Anyway, I think that's about all I've got for today, guys. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again next time.